2, 3. Okay.
Confidentiality.
Boom.
I
Something
mean,
that
part
stood
of it,
out to me. Oh, sorry, Vanessa, you
go
can go.
ahead.
Okay, I'm gonna go. Something that stood out to me was the right to privacy that I think was talked about in the lecture or something, which is like a one of our amendments or yeah. So that was interesting, and I do think that that really like helps develop the therapeutic ship to know that like this person is basically sworn to secrecy other than all of these exceptions. But yeah, just thinking about like trust and relationship building, I do think that having like a really explicit confidentiality agreement would help the therapeutic alliance.
For sure, especially if that child, if it's a child that like you're working with, I think that report would be really like important to like hold with privacy. Especially if they've never experienced some sort of privacy,
Mm.
then I think yeah, it would be really essential um, in the therapeutic relationship. For me, I guess something that stood out would be like the whole Berg um law, the case about how parents don't have the exclusive right to assert or waive the therapist client privilege, especially like if the child or the adolescent like proves to have sufficient maturity. um I think that stood out to me, and I think it's like very like I don't know, like I would definitely need to like tiptoe around that because I feel like parents could still some way somehow assert some sort of privilege. So I guess like it would really have to go. I think it how much of that informed consent that the therapist gave in the initial onset of therapy, I think would be really crucial. Um, that way, I mean, at least the therapist can like fall back on that and be like, well, I definitely gave you guys a notice about this at the beginning
Mm.
of therapy. Um, yeah, and then the whole thing about the duty to protect and what was it? Where did they go? Warn, protect, and predict. Yeah. It said that therapists used to be able to use clinical judgment, but now that's not the case here in California. And it just makes me think of like all the children and adolescents that I've worked with where like it's their parents that are constantly kind of putting them in certain circumstances that I'm like, okay, are you sure they're in immediate danger or are you putting them in immediate danger?
Right.
Like, what am I predicting here? I'm predicting that you're the cause of this.
Yeah.
And so I think it does get very like I don't know. Like I don't know. I guess it would be very helpful to have like supervision at that point. Cause then the Tarasoff saying that regardless you have to you have to do a report. And so hopefully when I'm doing this report, like I have a supervisor that's kind of aware of like the situation of the case and like the whole therapeutic relationship so that even though I'm making this report, how much weight does it hold, you know?
Mm.
Yeah, that was something that jumped out at me is just like so many of these seemed intuitive that I felt really good about it. And then when one comes along that doesn't feel intuitive, it makes me question my intuition on all the others. And I was like, oh no, like all these seemed to make so much sense or to feel confident in being able to make that judgment. And then I read that in California, it's not that.
Mm.
And you can't even do that. So it was just kind of like, oof. Another thing that jumped out at me was the just self-harm and like non-suicidal self-injury and just my own ethics on that and how I would feel how much I would feel if
what I thought was a non-suicidal self-injury just got taken too far and something really bad happened and I didn't say anything and then
Mm.
something something went wrong and how did the legality of confidentiality come into that?
Yeah,
Um,
that's really scary to think about.
yeah.
I think that that report really um plays a huge part in like the confidentiality because
Hmm.
like that's when it matters, you know, for whether or not the client's going to express it or not. Um and I think for me, like the only thing that popped out was like, okay, sure, you can have suicidal ideation. How far are you willing to go with that suicidal ideation? Like, do you have a plan? Are you willing to act on it?
Right.
And if so, are you gonna put others into harm's way? Cause then I feel like that's where the line crosses. You can have it, you can have passive thoughts, and at least we're talking about it. But is it like, are you about to act on it? Is there something triggering you? Is there something that you no longer can cope with that will make you take that further step?
Hmm.
And was it in this class that was like really encouraging you to just really like bluntly ask, like, are you thinking about killing yourself? Like, some class we took is
That
encouraging
was
you to just
community
like,
mental health.
okay, yeah,
When we did the suicide assessment, yeah, they just said
yeah,
flat out like
Yeah,
like how do you plan to end your life?
yeah.
right.
And like just like do you have a plan? It's like, oh, just saying that. Oh
I
my
Yeah.
know.
gosh.
It's actually
I mean,
like giving me goosebumps.
honestly, like
Yeah.
I have so much experience with it where like I ask it every morning in my work.
Wow, Gio,
I
yeah.
go through a whole
Wow.
series of questions. Do you guys want to hear it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, are you feeling safe right now? Are you having any thoughts of harming yourself or harming others? Are you seeing or hearing anything that's not there?
Mm,
Do you feel confident enough to come to a staff member if any of those things should change? And I mean, typically they'll give me all no's sometimes, or I mean, they'll be like, yes, I'm having thoughts of harming myself. And I'm like, okay, like, what are those thoughts? What are they saying to you? They'll get into it. And I'm like, do you have a plan? Do you feel like there's something in this facility that you would want to use? Sometimes they'll tell me
Mm,
yes, and sometimes they'll tell me no. If they tell me yes, then they're immediately placed on line of sight. So like you can't basically go anywhere without being line of sight of a staff member.
mm,
mm-hmm.
Like a nurse will kind of periodically like check in with you. And then if they feel like they're like having a ideation, like homicidal ideation, then I mean, even more so, like your line of sight, because then you're a danger to others, and that's not what we
hmm.
want in this hospital.
Right.
So, yeah, I feel so confident asking that now. So I feel like that's why I'm like, okay, I know where to draw the line. You know, like
Mm,
Yeah.
be passive, that's fine, but like let's talk about it. Let's see where this is coming from then.
mm,
Yeah. That makes me think of all the exceptions
Mhm.
that are listed and then it's like um yeah, just in general who's to decide, but I like the line of sight because it's kind of like you're not really making an exception to any confidentiality. You're just adding in layers to make it
Yeah.
so that maybe you don't have to share anything.
Right. Yeah, if you're not willing to like get into detail, okay, maybe later you will be, but you'll be line of sight until you
Hmm.
talk about
Right.
it. And then if they lie, you know, and they say, "Yeah, I'm okay, whatever," and then we find out that they're trying to self-harm in their room, then that's when we get into like they get denial of rights. So then we have to take away their clothing and
mm-hmm.
anything that they can use to like harm themselves. And then that's kind
Mm,
of like exceptions there too.
Mm.
yeah. Mm.
Yeah. Any final thoughts about confidentiality being super duper important?
Except for when
I
it's not.
I know, right? I was kind of glancing back over exceptions.
I don't think I have anything else.
I don't either.
I don't either.
Okay.